Hi everybody, today I'm looking at the Minolta XM, or it was called the X-1 in Japan, or the XK in North America. It was released in Japan in 1973 and came to North America and Europe in 1974, and it was actually produced up until 1981, and it's Minolta's first truly professional SLR camera. And what I mean by that is it had interchangeable finders and focusing screens and was aimed at the professional photographer. Now the problem is, at the time it had two problems, which was the Nikon F2 and the Canon F1, which were establishing themselves on the professional market. So unfortunately that was its competition, and it didn't really take off into that field as much as what Minolta wanted to, and it wasn't until late 1976 that they brought out a motor drive version of the camera. You couldn't actually fit a motor drive to the base of this one, so they brought out a specific model, and I think then it was a bit too late for the professionals to latch onto the system. It's unfortunate because this camera has many features that the other cameras don't have. It was quite advanced for the time. One is automatic exposure with an electronic shutter. I say it's a shame it didn't really take off as much as what Minolta dreamed of, and it took actually 10 years to develop this camera, so it's unfortunate. Very rare to find in the second-hand market. I found this one off eBay. It's fully working. It's not mint condition, but it's nice user condition, and I aim to take a film out in it one day and give it a blast and see what results I get. The lenses are supposed to be magnificent. They produced these lenses with this camera, the MC lenses. It can use earlier lenses with stop down metering, but these particular lenses are meant to be really high quality. Got lovely focusing action and aperture, and the apertures move in half click stops. This is the 50mm 1.4. Now I'm going to go over the functions and features of this camera and hopefully tell you something a bit about it. Now I'm going to start with the controls, and if you look to the top plate, you've got on the right side a frame counter window which automatically resets when you open the camera back, and it counts up to 36, I believe. That's got the serial number. You've got the film advance lever and shutter cock lever, and in the centre of that is the actual shutter release button, and that has a threaded centre, so you can attach a external cable to fire it remotely. Now, say because of the finders, you find the different finders have got different functions on them. They actually produced 6 finders altogether for this camera. 3 had metering and 3 without metering. They also produced at the end up to 11 focusing screens. This one's fitted with the standard, we call a piece screen, which has a split microprism in the centre, and it's like a universal screen. Some of the other screens you have to compensate on the exposure with the screens and different lenses. So looking at the shutter dial goes from 1/2000th of a second, manually adjustable, right down to 1 second, and then you've got B setting, which is for bulb, and X, which is electronic flash sync at 1/100th of a second. Now, so this shutter is a electronically focal plane titanium shutter, so it needs batteries to function, except on B setting, which is mechanical, and the X setting is a mechanical setting as well, so if all batteries fail then you can still use the camera at 1/100th of a second if you set it to X. So that's manually setting the shutter speed. You've also got a auto setting where you set the aperture on the lens and the camera sets the correct shutter speed corresponding to the exposure. Now it uses two, in the metered heads it uses two CDS cells that overlap each other, and the type of metering Minolta called it was CLC, which stands for Contrast Light Compensator, and apparently it's supposed to cope with a lot of different light situations, and they compare it to a modern matrix metering. So in theory you shouldn't have to compensate much for different light scenes. Now the problem with CDS cells is they deteriorate with age, and unfortunately that's what's happened to the CDS cells in this. They do actually function, but they're giving incorrect readings, and what happens with the CDS cell is it's basically a resistor. When the light shines on it, electric flows through it, and the more the light the less it resists, so it obviously gives more current and affects the metering accordingly. Now when they age, what happens is they offer less resistance, so it takes less light to move the meter in, and so you get over readings or underexposed shots. Now you can compensate with the ASA film speed setting, but it's not quite as accurate obviously, and if they get too bad, that is no use whatsoever, and you may have to use a manual meter. This one is still functional. It tends to need 1 to 2 stops difference on the film speed setting. So on the top of the finder is the film speed setting, and on this you just basically click stop it. It's not got a lock button, and in the centre of that is a compensation dial. You have to lift up the ASA dial and rotate it, and you've got various different settings in there for the different finders with the different lenses. Sorry, the different focusing screen with the different lenses. Now around this shutter dial you also got a very handy feature for quickly compensating. You can press in this button here and it'll adjust the exposure up to plus to minus 2 stops, and it's variable, so basically you push that in. If you push it to the right it gives you more exposure, and if you move it to the left it gives you less exposure, and you can see the corresponding difference in the viewfinder as regards what shutter speed it's going to give you. Now say when you look through the viewfinder, what you see is at the top you see the aperture reading, which it takes off the lens. There's actually a little window in the top of the finder, and on the right hand side is a shutter speed scale that goes from 1/2000th of a second down to 1 second, and then to B and X, and then auto at the bottom. So if you set it on auto you see a solid bar against that, and basically the reading is automatically assessed on the shutter speed dial. If you set it to manual then the solid bar moves accordingly to that set shutter speed, and then the needle shows you what it thinks should be the shutter speed according to the exposure. Another feature around this is you can actually set manually the shutter speeds up to 16 seconds. And what you do is you set the shutter speed on the dial to B, and then around the shutter speed dial at the bottom you've got this chrome ring, and you're pressing this button here, and if you look on the rear side you'll see there's a B setting, a little red dot with the B, but if you can move, you press the lever in and then you can move that when it's set on B on the shutter speed dial to different settings, and you've got 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds and 16 seconds. So that's electronically timed settings. So if you move it to 8 and you advance the film, cock the shutter. When you fire it, it times 8 seconds for you. Now electronically as well, if you set it to auto, it has a range from 16 seconds up to 1/2000th of a second, but at the lower speed setting it's said not to be accurate because of the EV reading, which is from EV1 up to EV17. So you've got to take that into consideration. Yeah, it can time from 16 seconds up, but it may not be accurate at those lower speeds. On this particular finder, so this is the standard AE finder, which stands for Auto Electro Finder. And on this finder you also have a viewfinder closing button. So if you move that, it actually draws a blind across the viewfinder if you're using it on a tripod, so you're stopping light getting in and affecting the metering. And on the left hand side is a metering on off button, because in its normal state the meter is off until you activate it, and you can turn that on and it activates the meter, so the meter is on all the time. There's also another quite unique feature on this camera which Minolta used, which some liked and some didn't, and it's this little, they call it a sensor switch on the front. You can see it's got a little movement on it. It's very difficult to see actually. It actually moves in and out at the bottom. So the idea is, as you hold the camera, you can easily press it in with a finger, and if you've got the finder switch set to off and you press that lever in, that activates the meter as well. But a problem a lot of photographers found with that in the auto mode was get it set on auto and using the sensor switch to give you the reading. Obviously that's when it sets the shutter speed, and if you didn't press the sensor switch or you wasn't holding it correctly, when you fired it would think that the reading was too low, so it would actually keep the shutter open for about 30 seconds until it released it. So that's something you have to be aware of with the sensor switch, and that's why a lot of photographers didn't like it. Moving across, this is a window on top of the finder that just lets light into the shutter speed scale on the right. Here is the rewind crank and lever for tightening and rewinding the film. Here is a little release button for an accessory, which is this little hot shoe that you can slide on to the rewind lever, and you can fit a flash onto that, and that little button just releases that because it locks on. Looking on the back as well, you've got a finder release button, and you simply press that in and the finder can be pulled off, and that's the finder with the electronic contact to make contact with the body. And if you look inside, you can see the focusing screen, which can be removed, like I say, for up to 11 different focusing screens, different types, and you just flick it out with your finger or thumb, that little tab there at the back. Now to put the focusing screen back on, I'll just point something out as well. You notice it's not got any shutter speed readings on the actual dial itself, unlike the Nikon F2 or the Nikon F. So it has to have a head. All the heads have these little shutter dials on the top, whether they are metered or not. And the other thing is, when you put the finder back on, you have to reset the Aperture Indexing button, which is this here. And this is basically what reads the aperture off the lens for the auto exposure. So this little lever here, you have to push it until it clicks to that side, and then it's that lever what actually reads off the tab, the black tab on the lens. So you can put the finder back on. I tend to press the button back in, make it sit better and easier. Going to the front, you've got a self timer which can time from 6 to 10 seconds, and to use it you have to move it far enough so it actually locks on, and that is deemed to be about 6 seconds. So you can cock the shutter, set it to shutter speed, and what you do is to release the self timer you press this little button here. You've also got a depth of field preview button, and the way it works on this is you actually press that button in and you don't have to hold it at all, it just pushes out, and you can see it's showing now the correct aperture that's set on the lens, so you can do depth of field previews. And also that feature was used if you was using earlier lenses, so you could get stop down metering. Now to reset that, you just push it back in again. The lens has come off with this nice lens mount release, which is very nice looking, and you just press that in and move the lens to the left, it comes off. Now looking inside as well, you can see the mirror, and you can lock the mirror up. The way you do that is with the preview button out, you turn to line the red dots, and you'll see it puts up the mirror, and you can leave it on that for as many shots as you wish, and to put it back you just press the button in to reset itself. Another feature you've probably noticed is this, where the foam mirror buffer foam is, there's a plate that moves up as it actually takes the shot, and the mirror goes up, you see it actually pushes that up, and I'll show you that if I set it to 1 second. You'll see that it actually pushes that up and then drops it back down again after the exposure. Put on the lens again, you simply align the red dot with the red dot and twist on. Also on this side is a flash sync socket for connecting electronic or flash bulbs, and you've got a setting here, a little switch that sets it to X for electronic bulbs or FP for flash bulbs, which can be set at various shutter speeds, but with electronic flash you would set it on X for 1/100th of a second. On this side here you've got a battery check, just a little lever which you move that, and if it lights up it's deemed that the battery is sufficient. Now the batteries go in the bottom, and it's got a nice little button here that you can actually move with your thumb, and it just moves it from C closed to O open, and it uses MS76 button cells, or nowadays they're called SR44s, which are silver oxide cells, 2 of those, and you put those with the plus side facing up, and those are 1.5 volt each, so you don't need 1.35 volt batteries. Put the cap back on, just make sure your batteries are sitting properly, would help. Difficult to do when I'm trying to do it around this tripod. There you go. You can say you can lock it with your thumb. There's a feature as well that if the battery becomes insufficient, and it will lock the mirror up in the up position because there's not enough power to release the mirror, then you can reset it by moving that to the open position, and it flips down the mirror and resets it. Also on the bottom you've got a tripod socket, and you've got a film reminder, so you can set what type of film you've got loaded against the number of exposures, just to remind you what film you've got in. On a later version they actually put a film slot for putting a piece of the card of the film cartridge in. Also on the bottom you have the rewind button, so when you get to the end of the film, pressing the button you can rewind it with the rewind crank, and that also serves as a multiple exposure button, and if you want to take another shot on the same frame at any time you simply press that button in, it pushes in, but you only press it once and let go, and then when you go to advance the film, it doesn't advance the film at all, it just cocks the shutter. So that's a nice feature for giving you multiple exposures. So there you go, that's a quick look at the Minolta XM. I don't want to go in too detail, and as you know, I'm actually a Nikon expert rather than a Minolta expert, so please excuse me for not being as enthusiastic probably about this camera, but it's a lovely camera. I first saw it on the Nikon F2 Facebook group. Somebody put a picture of one of these with his F2, and at that time I commented, that's a camera I've got to have, and as you can see, I've ended up with one. There you go, Minolta XM, nice little camera. I've actually got the manual with it as well. Nice little manual, goes through things. Many accessories and that for this camera. And thanks for looking again, and hope to catch you soon with a new video.